So Jared Cannonier will be fighting Chao Barallo tonight at a UFC fight night, and I can't believe I'm just talking about this fight now. I should have been talking about it, at least a week prior, but we got work and all this other shit to do. Anyway, this is gonna be a good fight, and it really took me a while to think about what specifically will happen. And to decipher what will happen, I had to really look at Cannonier and Barallo's last fights. So that would be Cannonier versus Imavov, and Barallo versus was it Craig, something fucking Craig, but he's the Scottish guy, and Paul Craig. But yeah, these two are they're good fighters. And looking at the Cannonier Imavov fight. I had only seen clips of the Cannonier Imavov fight prior to watching it, and I thought that Cannonier flat out kind of just like lost it, but he never really did. When I really looked at the fight, Cannonier was there. He was winning the exchanges on Imavov. He was touching Imavov. He was landing on a lot of his shots. He was winning in the clinch. He was able to utilize the clinch to bring the fight to the ground when he wanted to against Imavov. Imavov was just really eating all of Cannonier's fucking punches and kicks, and just landing a few of his own, but just eating it and just kind of he was fighting. I can't really say Imavov was bad, but he was losing the fight. And then nearing the end of the fight, like maybe rounds 3 and 4, that was when Imavov started to mix in his own clinch work, and he started winning in the clinch against Cannonier. And then the fight ended with Imavov landing, I think it was a really hard overhand left or right that really just spun Cannonier around. I think Cannonier probably ate too many of Imavov's punches, and I guess that one just did him in. Cannonier started wobbling, but it was a controversial stoppage by the referee because Cannonier kind of brought himself back together. And by the time the ref stopped it, Cannonier was kind of still upright, like he wasn't really out of it. So it was a controversial stoppage. And I think it was a bad stoppage. That being said, Cannonier was still caught, and he was caught bad, and he did, end up getting wobbled. But he was winning a lot of those exchanges. I considered a lot of his punches to be heavy. His kicks looked heavy, especially the leg kicks he had on Imavov. Imavov was just a tank in that fight. Imavov fucking ate everything Cannonier threw at him with a fucking side of nuggets and some fries and shit, and he just kept going. So I think it was a good showing from Cannonier. Imavov was just kind of the better man, I don't want to say defensively, but the better man durability wise. Looking back at, and then so I then took that fight to really think about the type of fighter Cannonier really is. And then I had to look at the Barallo fight against Paul Craig. And Paul Craig, again, his ground game is what he's really known for. And he kind of is altogether a pretty shit fighter. But he's got good ground game, and he really had good kicks against Barallo. But you could see Paul Craig was really just had zero business on standing up and fighting with Barallo. Even Paul Craig knew it, because he kept trying to fucking pull guard and bring the fight to the ground, but Barallo refused, as he should, and wanted to continue striking with Paul Craig. Paul Craig landed some pretty good kicks on Barallo. His kicks were pretty good. He just had no fucking hand movement, no hand striking whatsoever, no hand game, nothing to do, nothing with the fucking hands he could really do, except for like a looping left some of the time, but nothing down the pipe, no jabs, no crosses, nothing like that. And Barallo was the one to ideally do that. And when Barallo did that, he would land on Paul Craig and land pretty hard. And the fight went on for some time, not a long time, but then, after a while, fucking Barallo just started teeing off on Craig. And again, Craig with his hands kind of midway down and not really knowing how to fucking counter strike with his hands, just got caught and then caught again. And then he was out. Paul Craig was just really fucking out of that fight. Barallo looked good. He looked fast. Again, really nice 1-2s. I didn't think Barallo looked spectacular, but, for the fighter that Paul Craig is, he was good for that fight against Paul Craig. But again, this is a step up in competition, of course. So this is Baralo's next big test. And, before looking at both fighters' recent fights, I had Baralo because, I bought into the whole nerd club hype. As you know, Baralo's in this whole hyped up gym and the fighting nerds, something like that. I don't really get it. I don't really like it, but it's whatever. It gets attention. People love it. So that's that. But I bought into it. So I'm like, oh, this guy's an up and comer. All the fighting nerds guys, these guys are future legends. They look all good and stuff. But this is people clip farming highlights and shit like that. But going into this fight, I'm gonna go with Cannonier. Look, especially looking, not even because again, I had Baralo. So in all fairness, I had Baralo going into this prediction. I was gonna tell you guys that I think Baralo's gonna win. But then I had to really do my research and look at both fighters' recent fights, their most recent fight. And looking at that, Baralo, again, looks good, but he's fighting Paul Craig, who's a shit striker, okay? So I don't really have a lot to judge off of. I could go further back, but again, I really just want to judge it off of the recent fights. And again, I'm not saying Baralo's striking is shit, although Baralo's hands were pretty low. And but again, it could have just been because he's fighting Paul Craig, so he knows himself that Paul Craig's a shit striker. So I'm excited to see what he'll bring against Cannonier. But I'm going to go with Cannonier. And I'll go with Cannonier because I feel like in exchanges, and I feel like there will be a lot of exchanges in this fight, and exchanges, like punches thrown back and forth, some counter striking, all that shit. And when these things do happen, I like Cannonier's chances because I think there will be a lot of back and forth between Cannonier and Baralo with the striking. And in those, exchanges, I really like how heavy Cannonier's hands are. He looks like he's throwing a lot of weight and power into these punches. And especially if Cannonier can bring this fight to the clinch against the cage, I think Cannonier can really fucking land some work, knees, trips even, bring the fight to the ground with him in advantageous spots. I think this is a good fight for Cannonier. I think Baralo could also come in, show us what he's worth, and maybe just straight out starch Cannonier. But I think I'm going to go with Cannonier because I just like how smooth, how he was able to connect on Imavov at will. And I think he'll be able to do the same thing with Baralo, especially if Baralo goes into this fight with his hands low and his guard low, like he did against Paul Craig. But I don't think he will. But I think this fight will sway towards Cannonier. But yeah, I figured I'd just tell you guys. And if I have to give you a specific prediction, I'm going to go with Cannonier winning late in the fight. I'll go Cannonier with a round. Okay, not so late, but I'll go Cannonier with a round 3 TKO. I think it's a 3-round. No, I think this is a 5-rounder, I think. But it might be 3. See, I got to fucking look up the rounds. But anyway, I'll just say, for the sake of this fucking video, Cannonier late fight TKO. So that'll be, I'll go final round, actually. Cannonier final round TKO against Baralo. They get into a really mean exchange after, fighting for so long. And in this exchange, Baralo can't take anymore and just goes out. TKO, by the way, not KO. I don't think Baralo will be slept, but Baralo will have had too much and probably, fall to the ground or some shit like that. Anyway, that's my predictions for Baralo Cannonier happening tonight. Check it out. Love you guys. Let me know what you think.